The majority of Americans have no retirement savings. Okay. And that's surprising and shocking, but not terribly. I mean, all American adults, sure, you got a bunch of 20-year-olds in there. They haven't started saving yet, right? So what's important is to look at the cohort, right? So if you look at the cohort that's 55 to 65 years old, right? The one that's just approaching retirement age, the one that should have the most assets now saved up, right, to fund the rest of their lives. A full 49% have $0 saved. Okay, so half of them right off the table have nothing. If you look at the remaining 51%, the median savings account of that 51% is about $134,000, which isn't nothing. But if you're 65 years old, that's not going to last you the next 15, 30 years of your life, right? And for people that are thinking, okay, well, you know, a lot of folks can rely on Social Security and Medicare. Well, the average Social Security monthly payment is $1,600. That's $1,666.49, right? You can't live off that, folks. In fact, the average rent in America right now is $1,900. So it doesn't even cover the average rent cost, right? Moreover, the Social Security trustees just released their annual report. They are saying that the trust fund is going to be insolvent in 13 years by 2035. So even that meager amount may not be there, or at least in that size, be reduced in just 13 short years. That's if nothing happens. And we can have a whole debate over what the government might do between now and then. But on the current trajectory, on track to be insolvent in 13 years. Medicare is even worse. It's on track to be insolvent in 6 years by 2028. Yep. All right. So just horrifying stats, to be honest. I mean, this is a massive economic and social crisis, and we're not even talking about it yet. As a nation, we haven't even admitted the problem yet here. So, Lance, I see you nodding as I'm seeing all this. Where I'm going with this is just we are so unprepared for the future. And if we now enter into a recession that has any real teeth to it, it could be really uncomfortable for a lot of people in society coming up here. And I don't want to be selling gloom and doom, but I just see enough probability here of some rough times ahead that I just want to make sure that we're opening as many eyes as possible to people that now is a good time to take precaution for what could happen down the road. Not saying it's absolutely going to, but what could.
$96 trillion is the unfunded liabilities of Social Security, Medicare, and basically our social safety net. And, you know, people keep going, well, you know, government's going to do something, right? Well, we just just recently added more people to the Social Security roll. And every time, and this has been going on since the 60s, and it's all in good, you know, it's all set up in good nature, and we want to help people. And so, you know, we add widows and orphans to the Social Security rolls, and then we add, firemen and pension other people to the Social Security rolls. And then we add more people to Social Security rolls for some reason or another. And so every administration comes along and they go, well, you know, we need to give more people money, so let's add more people to Social Security. And we keep doing this. The problem is demographics. In 1939, when we were passing, you know, Social Security and really getting it up and running, there were 16 people paying into Social Security for every person that was taking out of it. Today, that number is less than 2 to 1. And, you know, it's interesting. We've had this conversation here on the show before, but, you know, there's a very big issue at hand in terms of demographics, which is our birth rate in the US. And more people are opting not to have children. More and more people are opting to have alternative lifestyles that don't produce children. You know, and so, you know, and you know, lots of conversations recently about abortion, right? Because of the recent Supreme Court ruling. But that all provides, less bursts within the economy. And there's an old saying is like, if you want your economy to be stronger, have babies. You know, it's, you know, China ran into this problem with the one-child policy, right? And just basically devastated their economy for a long time. They've had to try to reverse out of that now.
Yeah,
and
they've hollowed out their entire demographic pyramid. I mean, they've got a massive reckoning ahead.
Exactly.
And we've done a little bit of the same, not as much as them, but yeah.
Yeah, but we've got the lowest birth rate since 1940. So, you know, Japan's got the same problem as well. And you can look at China and Japan and see exactly where we're headed. And Japan has a very big social pension system, just like we have in Social Security, that is entirely supported by the government. It's just, and if the government doesn't support it, it's a problem. But that's why we always talk about Japan. It's basically a fly looking for a windshield. we're kind of very much in that same situation. My partner and I, Richard Rosso, we constantly have this debate at the office because he's like, well, Lance, if the government doesn't handle Social Security, you're just going to have people showing up and you will be stepping over the bodies in the streets because they all depend on Social Security. Hey, I get it, but the numbers don't lie. You cannot continue to pay out what you're paying out in Social Security based on the simple math of what you've got coming into the system. And at some point, you're going to have to, there's two choices. At some point, you're going to have to make very tough decisions about who gets money from Social Security and who doesn't, or those choices are going to get made for you through debt structures, people saying, hey, I don't want your debt anymore. The same problem Japan's going to have down the road here sooner than later. But this is going to be the problem that is facing the economy. And again, and this is why we talk about, going back to the original part of this conversation, another article I wrote was talking about, we've had, and this goes to the heart of why buy and hold investing doesn't work. And, just, buy an index and hold on to it, you'll be fine over time. If that worked, if that really worked, if I could just buy an index and stick a little bit of money into it, and over the long period of time, I'm going to be fine. If that really worked the way it was supposed to work, then why is it after three of the biggest bull markets in history from 1980 to present, that you have so many people, according to your own statistics, Adam, that either have zero savings or have less than 1 year's worth of savings in the bank?
Well, and so I want to get here to some really practical, tactical stuff for folks,
Yeah.
but to that point, it's multifactorial. To your point, kind of how we ended up here. But there were two things that were really interesting, and they're worth touching on briefly. And one we don't really even have to, which is the massive wealth inequality that's been created by the Federal Reserve. Right? We've railed about that enough. But the key thing with that is not only did the Federal Reserve do a massive wealth transfer with its policies into the pockets of the already rich, but they've also created huge inflation, right, which is raising the cost of living. So you've got the worst case scenario for the middle and lower classes, right, where their real wages aren't going anywhere, and their real costs are rising, right? So there's just less and less available to save, right? A big part of it too is human nature. It's a story of human nature in two ways, and I'll be really brief on this because I kind of go deep into this in the video that I did. There had always been government pensions. They've been around for millennia. Actually, the Romans started them, but America had started offering pensions in the Revolutionary War, and then over time, state and municipal governments adopted it. But in the late 1800s, the private industry said, "Hey, we'll take a page from this book," and they started offering corporate pensions, and people loved it. It was a great way to attract talent, right? Hey, come work for us. We got a generous pension program, right? That's how they competed. But then by the 60s, by 1960 or by the mid 60s, 50% of all private workers were covered by a corporate pension, which is amazing when you compare that to today, right? And the reason why, and this is why I'm flagging it, is the corporations they projected out at the future liabilities that they were taking on here, and they said, oh my God, like these are ballooning like crazy. We've got this baby boomer generation that's just hitting employment age, and they're the biggest ever in history. Like this is going to totally bankrupt us. Like all our profits are going to be to paying these people's pensions. So around the same time, probably not very much of a coincidence, you had ERISA or whatever it's called. You had the launch of the IRA, you had the launch of the 401k a few years after that. And it was sold to workers as, hey, this is putting your retirement in your hands. You don't want to have to depend on your company to be a good steward for you. Some of these, you don't want the guy disappearing in the middle of the night with a corporate pension fund. If you want more in retirement, well, you can just increase your contributions. Like you're in the driver's seat. This is great. And people kind of liked it. They said, oh, that sounds cool, right? So we started this grand experiment really right as the baby boomers hit adulthood and began working in mass, right? And of course, the corporations loved it. They were like, phew, we got all of that stuff off our books. And now we can funnel all our profits, everything to the bottom line, and we can, pay ourselves big salaries and buy back our stock and make a ton of money, right? So it was a massive transfer of liability from the corporate balance sheet to the household balance sheet here, right? And it was sold as, hey, this is all great for you. Well, this 40-year experiment, we're now getting to the point where we're finally seeing the end results of it. And it's really bad, where people didn't save. And they didn't save for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, but we also got to own it too, that human nature, we're wired to maximize today, right? And so I can either save money today in my retirement fund, and yeah, I guess I'll have it decades down the road, or I can do something fun with it, or bills are tight this month, I'm just going to push towards that, right? And we just didn't save nearly as much as we should, in addition to all the other issues that we had. So if you enjoyed this video clip, click here to watch another one you should like.